Good morning, everyone. How are we today? Are we ready? Yeah. I hate standing in front of these kind of screens, so I'm just going to whistle about. So what I hope to do with you today is to understand if you are an organization considering to start with learning analytics and learning design, where should we start? If you're considering that. So who is currently thinking about, oh, I want to start using data and learning analytics? A third, maybe half. Okay. Who is currently thinking about the second thing, about how then to effectively support your staff to use that learning analytics? Couple. Great. And last but not least, who is actually really critical towards the use of learning analytics in your organization? Of course we are. Fantastic. Fantastic. So what I hope to show you today is some experience of the Open University. The Open University has around 200,000 students studying somewhere on the globe, and we have these lovely students here. And who has seen this picture before? No one has seen this picture before. This is a picture I've been using for the last 5 or 6 years giving keynotes, and I really love this. This is a German system built by Germans 11 years now? Yes, 11 years ago. So imagine you have our students on their phones, on their tablets, clicking away, doing lots of interesting stuff. Then we have a so-called learning management system, Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, whatever you want. And in those systems, we're basically trying to capture how our students are learning. We have this small issue of data privacy, which I'm not going to talk about. And then you have much smarter people than me who do lots of number crunching and are able to develop all kinds of amazing algorithms. And then they develop these algorithms in terms of visualizations of a dashboard, and they give this dashboard then to teachers. And what I would like you to do now is to say hi to your neighbor and talk for maybe a minute or so and criticize this model. What is wrong with this model? Go ahead. All right, so who wants to say what's wrong with this model? There are revolving mics, so just raise your hand and then somebody will come. If you're close to here, I'm happy to run. What's wrong with this model? Let's just shout it out. Yeah, all the way in the back. Just shout it out. Exactly, bingo, well spotted. That's definitely one missing link.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Oh, very.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, cool.
Of course.
What else is missing in this model? Yes. Yes. So it seems that there's a kind of flow going to the teacher, but how do you ensure that you're actually building on whatever students are doing? To be honest, this is the Open University, and I will show you later this morning. It's a great model, but of course it misses a trick or two. Another thing is always these models are predicting that a male teacher is predicting the world, which is of course a very bad thing. But anyway, that's on a side note. So keep on asking. I mean, if I misunderstand something, if you don't agree with me, just raise your hand. I don't have to wait until the end of the questions. So in learning analytics, this has been an amazing field in the last 12 to 13 years. And there's been a fantastic growth. And there's a really good paper by Hernandez de Mendes, who basically looked at 17 large organizations across the globe who have implemented learning analytics at scale. And what they basically have found, looking at those 17 organizations, there are basically 3 kinds of benefits. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in terms of learner benefits, there's increased engagement, there's lots of evidence of personalized learning using learning analytics. There's a lot of opportunity. I don't know if this is relevant for higher education, but in secondary and primary education, parents can actually see what their students are doing, or their children. That might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. But in particular, from a faculty perspective, there's lots of evidence, including at the Open University, that it really helps to critically reflect on how have you designed your course, and is it working based on what you see from the big data. And I think, in a way, this is one of the kind of big benefits that we've seen at the Open University. We've written, embarrassingly, over 300 papers of how we implement learning analytics at scale. And I think the number one benefit we found at the Open University is a kind of improved pedagogical awareness of teachers, because we can basically give them real-time data of their decisions and how students are reacting to that. And I think that's a really kind of beneficial trait of learning analytics. And last but not least, and I don't know whether this is a good thing or not, it allows senior managers, pro-vice chancellors, vice chancellors to identify courses which are doing really well and also courses which are not doing so well. So it allows for identification of good practice, but it can also be used on the other side. So it's up to us to decide how we use this. At the same time, Hernandez and Mendes identified 7 key challenges. One is ethics, and we were the first university in the world to have an ethics policy on learning analytics, which you can freely copy and paste. Just Google Open University Ethics Learning Analytics Policy. We have a very strong data governance policy in terms of how we define data, how we're going to use data. We discuss it with students. And another limitation is research and practice. And I guess what we've seen, and I will hopefully show you this today, is there's a lot of scope still for theoretical and educational foundational work in terms of using learning analytics, and also looking in terms of practice. How can you use learning analytics in practice? And that's basically my main talk for today. So this is our learning analytics dashboard. We've been implementing this since 2014, and what you can see is basically on the left-hand side a kind of overview of where students are in terms of their overall journey, and then we give access to data of students per student in terms of a kind of traffic light system. And this allows teachers to basically see whether or not students are progressing in the right way. And sorry, I have hay fever, and I'm struggling a little bit with my breath. So let me just grab a sip of water. And we've been basically implementing this in a way that I've learned at Maastricht University, which is doing it gently at first. We started with 2 teachers in 2013, 14. Then we went to 10. Then we went to 58. Then we went to 700. And currently, 7,000 teachers basically have access to these databases. And what you see on the one hand, this is a study 4 years ago or 3 years ago, is a tremendous growth in terms of access to these systems. But if you at the same time look at the adoption rate, it went from 89% to a third. So why is it that if we have all these amazing systems, why are only a third of our teachers using it? Any guesses? Scared, yeah. Lack of knowledge and skills, yeah. Time, priorities, yeah. So I'm really super grateful. We call our teachers who teach online associate lectures. They're fantastic teachers. But they mostly do this in a part-time capacity alongside their other job. And we've done lots of interviews with them. And what we basically found was partially it's a kind of political structure. So certain faculties, I think this resonates very much with Alexandra's story, certain faculties really push this. And we have certain faculties, of course, the business and law faculty, they have very high uptake. And I'm not going to mention the faculties that have low uptake, but you can guess which ones those are. So it's partially basically kind of the support structure around it. Similarly, we found that if you have teachers as champions, they encourage other teachers to use it. In certain faculties, there was lots of evidence generation and dissemination of does this work or not. And those faculties that are more engaged with this actually were more willing to adopt this system. But a fourth and a fifth point is really crucial, which has nothing to do with the kind of discipline. So one is the kind of digital literacy, which links to, I think, your point in a way. Some teachers are very comfortable looking at numbers like this. Others are not. And others are also saying, this is not my role as a teacher. I shouldn't be looking at numbers. I should be helping my students, or I should be, a trained economist, I should talk about Pareto optimization and not about these kind of things. So quite interestingly, our vice chancellor made a pleading appeal recently on YouTube that our research basically shows that just an increase of usage of 10% would lead to a 2% increase in retention. If you think about 200,000 students, 2% retention, that's a lot of money. But at this moment in time, we can't make this dashboard mandatory. It's a voluntary system. But our Vice Chancellor is hoping that putting out these kind of messages, teachers will start to use them. And the reason why it's important is that our research has shown that even if teachers use it, and this is a study by one of my PhD students, oftentimes teachers really struggle to make sense of these dashboards. So what you see here is a dashboard of an actual experienced teacher, and what she found in her research, these are teachers who've been using this for over a year, is that oftentimes we, as complex human beings, make really strange stories in our head. And some teachers, when we put them in the eye tracking lab, they had this complete fantasies of what the data was telling, but this was actually not in the system. Some teachers didn't even know that you, for example, could click on individual predictions of students. So I guess what I'm trying to say is even if you give access to data for teachers, you really have to think about your professional development in terms of how to make sense of this data. And why is it so important? Because in a range of studies, I think one of those 300, we basically found that even a very simple intervention in learning analytics can have a long-term impact. So this was an RCT study where the only thing we did was we gave a text and a phone call to the intervention group in the beginning of the course. And that's the only thing we did. And the other group didn't get the intervention. And as you can see on the lines, months and months afterwards, there was still a significant impact of that one phone call with that tutor. So what we're trying to say in an inarticulate way is learning analytics dashboards are amazing for teachers, but they have to learn how to effectively use it. And also these impacts can have long impacts for a very long period of time. So I'm now moving to a slightly different direction of travel because also the focus of this conference, and that's the notion of learning design. And learning design to me is real magic. The way how we design our courses fundamentally drives our student behavior. And as indicated by Barbara Wassens and Paul Kirchner's paper, the OU apparently is the first one who has been able to link learning design with real students' behavior. So this is the Open University. In the Open University, we found 4 types of teachers in the way how they design courses. One is basically designing lots of so-called constructivist, individual kind of learning journeys for our students. Another type of teacher has lots of frequent assessments and feedback. A third type of teacher is doing lots of doing stuff, so-called productive activities. And the last one is focused primarily on social constructivist learning design, like, for example, in Maastricht, where you work together. If you would have to predict which of the 4 types of teachers leads to the best student retention at the Open University, who thinks that the constructivist learning design is the best way to drive student retention? No one. One, okay. Who thinks assessment is the best driver? Okay, assessment feedback, okay. Who thinks that doing stuff productive? Okay, that's more. Who thinks that social constructivist? Of course, because we like working together. So we did lots of studies on this. One is by one of my PhD students, Kwan Neugen. And what we basically found was the way how we design courses fundamentally influences students' behavior. So we can see if you focus lots on individual types of learning, you have significantly lower engagement than if you, for example, design lots of socio-constructivist learning design patterns. What we also found was a significant positive relation between designing lots of individual learning activities and student satisfaction. Students love working on individual tasks at the Open University. Students absolutely hate working together. And also having lots of assessment. But these are the 2 key drivers for student retention. We found that a 1% increase in activities linked to communication leads to a 0.5% increase in retention. So if you think about this, I'm saving the university, or we are saving the university lots of money by doing this kind of activity, because you can show that the way how we design courses fundamentally drives student success. And this is most nicely illustrated by a workload map of one course. We've done this, of course, for hundreds of courses. But what you see is a kind of peaks and troughs of expected workload based on the learning design. And the red line is the kind of average engagement of students in that particular course. And what we basically found, and this is a bombshell, we think, is that 69% of what our students are doing on a week-by-week basis is determined by us. So if we tinker the learning design, our learning activities with 1%, 2/3 of our students are actually just following that approach, what we're designing. So what we're saying, and this links extremely well to the first keynote, is the way how we think about education fundamentally drives our students. But it also leads to very difficult and awkward questions. So for example, at the Open University, half of our students drop out after 1 year. Is that due to the students, or is that due to us? So what we're currently working on, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this, is to think about how can we start to better visualize these decisions to our teachers. So in a range of projects together with a range of European universities, we started to develop more authentic dashboards for our teachers. And this tool is freely available, shameless pitch, learning-design.eu. And if you go to that tool, it allows you for free to basically put in your learning design course and see how you're thinking about your design and how you're basically are planning your activities. And it automatically spits out learning analytics dashboards. And we started just before Christmas. And we already have 1,200 educators and over 350 learning designs in our course. And what is fascinating is not only do teachers like these kind of dashboards, we also give that to students. So students can see, oh, if I'm following the first 2 weeks of this particular course, which is designed by us, there's a lot of doing stuff, production. But in the second and the third week, there's less production, but there's more acquisition, for example. And in the third week, there is a lot of practice, for example. So by sharing these dashboards to students and giving real detailed information, and just go to the website, it's really great, we give a much better indication of what students are expected to do and the kind of activities that students find useful. And we've done a lot of workshop with teachers to basically fine-tune this, and we're still looking for teachers to further experiment this. So where are we going in the next 5 years? Because I'm mindful of time. I think I have 2 more minutes. Where do we see ourselves as an educational sector? So I think what I've hopefully shown you today is learning analytics is not just a concept. Lots of organizations across the globe are implementing this at scale, and it shows that the way we design our courses fundamentally drives our student behavior. But the next obvious question, and that comes back to the first picture that I showed you, how can we then provide effective and inclusive, personalized learning analytics to our students? Lots of the work that I've shown you today focuses still on what teachers might do with learning analytics. Why are we not giving this to our students? Why aren't we providing this automatically to our students? A fundamental question about who owns the data. Is it the student? Is it the institution? Is it the government? What about the ethics? What about the professional development of our staff and learners if they have to use all this data? And last but not least, there are lots of commercial companies interested in this data. Pearson has set up a fantastic new university on this. So how do we balance this with our own educational interests? So I'm really looking forward to your questions and comments. So thank you very much.